This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is True Crime XS.
Edgar was a case from August 2003. Edgar was a male that was living with a roommate downtown Vancouver. He was discovered murdered August the 27th, 2003. And since then we've been working on the file, but we do not have anyone in custody for the murder. With Edgar, I think that going back in time to 2003, I don't think Edgar came out as a gay male a few years before his death. And so with it, there was a number of, and Edgar's lifestyle, even to his close friends, there was a number of secrecy involved in his lifestyle and the men that he dated. So the frustration from our part is that a lot of people haven't come forward, or we don't really have had a chance to speak to everybody Edgar knows. And I think that goes with the question about Iggy. I think of people, when we released his name in the paper, his name was Edgar Leonardo. And I think there's people out there in the community that know him as Iggy that haven't come forward to help us out with the investigation. So far, going through Edgar's life, friends and interviews, we've identified 45 people who we kind of identified as persons of interest, and we've been able to go through systematically and eliminate them, kind of traveling across Canada to meet with people, interview them, and eliminate them as suspects. The composite is fairly new for the investigation, so with it, it's a person that we believe at the time either knew Edgar or was associated with Edgar. And we're looking for any information, maybe that somebody knew someone that looked like this, and obviously take into account that we believe this is what the person looked like in 2003, and it is 14 years after the murder. So if somebody knew anybody that kind of looked similar to the photograph, in 2003, if they have any kind of suspicions or inklings or just don't feel right about it, we're more than willing to sit down and speak with anybody to help kind of point us in a new direction.
Edgar was a Filipino male, and we're reaching out to anyone in the Filipino community, any of his co-workers now, 14 years later, that may have, this may trigger a small memory or a small incident that happened. You know, homicide investigations are never closed until someone is arrested and charged and convicted. We know it's solvable. It keeps Mike and I in contact. We discuss things all the time, new approaches to the file, new avenues of investigation, and we're just going to keep working at it.
Could she be? Who took her? What happened to her?
These are the questions Brenda James has asked over the last 14 years. What started as a promise to take care of Amber after her father died has turned into a mission to find her little sister.
My dad made me promise before he died. It's like he knew. And there's times when I want to just give up, but I can't. I just keep pushing and pushing. And it gets harder. You'd think it'd be a lot easier after all this time, but it ain't.
James had custody of her sister on April 9th, 2004, when Amber was dropped off at her mom's house for spring break. The then 16-year-old left her mom's house with her boyfriend. Her family never saw her again. But Brenda keeps her sister's face in the public eye.
It's Amber.
This picture is on the missing persons flyer Lieutenant Jerry Williams sees every day.
Just as a reminder that she's still out there somewhere.
The flyer, his Bible, and Amber's case file are the constants in his office. Lieutenant Williams opened the file for us.
All of these photos are tips that come in.
He says Amber's boyfriend dropped her off after he picked her up from her mom's.
The last confirmed sighting of Amber Cates was here. 14 years ago, she was visiting friends at a construction company's office. Just last year, Murray County Sheriff's detectives brought out cadaver dogs to try to look for clues.
Nothing was found, but Lieutenant Williams says he won't stop looking. After hours of interviews with Amber's friends, family, and boyfriend, her disappearance remains a mystery. He's been across the country, even Mexico, chasing possible sightings of Amber Cates.
I've had her from up in New England all the way out to California, but nothing so far.
Holding out hope, Lieutenant Williams says he's waiting for that one call.
I hope she calls me up and says, hey, you been looking for me?
Jessica Jaglois.
Okay. Bye.
News 2.
You know, I've been through several hundred of those parabonds, you know, the DNA makeup composites. And it's funny because the descriptions of those don't always match what they're saying, like particularly like when you come to like the hair and stuff. If they get a choice between brown and black hair, and it can make all the difference in the world. But I did look at him. I looked at him for this Canadian case because I was thinking he was talking about, you know, he's bisexual, and that's in the psych eval. He's explaining that he's always known that and sort of accepted it, but it's a problem in his relationship with his baby mama. So 2003, there was this case in Canada that I took a look at, Iggy Leonardo, and then I guess for 2004, we've got Amber Cates that's, you know, on his computer. So I took a look at her. And then, of course, there's some big cases that year. But we got into this debate about, like, you know, when did he make a hard and fast rule that even when he's not in remote areas, he's got to have no witnesses? Like he won't do anything if there's even the possibility of witnesses. And, like, how did he learn like that?
Welcome to episode 14 of True Crime XS. As we wrapped up 2003 and moved into 2004, we took a look at Canada again. We took a look specifically at the cases of Iggy Leonardo and Donna Allardyce, who went missing but was found deceased behind her home.
So in the official timeline, the FBI timeline, they have him renting a car from February 6, 2004 to February 13, 2004. So the February 6, 2004 to February 13th car rental is an Enterprise. It's out of Salt Lake City, Utah. It's a Volkswagen Jetta, a silver Volkswagen Jetta. And he did not have permission to leave the state, and he put 522 miles on it. So that's on the timeline.
Okay, so, you know, you talked earlier about the similarities between Samantha Koenig's abduction and the eyewitness account of Holly Bober's brother Clint talking about him being woken up by the dog barking and him looking out the window to see his sister kneeling in the carport facing a man that was kneeling that he assumed was her boyfriend. And I felt like there was something you left out, and so there you go. The reason that it seemed similar to me was all the stuff you said, but also when Israel Keys hopped through the drive-up window of Common Grounds, out of the corner of his eye, he caught what he thought might have been somebody who saw him. He wasn't entirely sure that they had seen him, but something gave him pause. And what part of what he was doing there, he was explaining to her about, you know, the kidnap for ransom bit, but he was also waiting because he wanted to see if, in fact, the person had seen him. If, in fact, they did see him, they thought it was strange, and if something was going to happen as far as, you know, them coming to see what was going on. And so he was biding time, and I think if you watch the video, I think they sit there for about 3 minutes, which is actually a really long time to just be sitting there. But he states later, and I don't know when he states it, but he was waiting to see if the guy or girl or person that at the very last second before he leapt through the window, he thought might have caught a glimpse of what he was doing. And so if that person had come to, you know, the window and said, hey, is everything okay? You know, he was waiting to see because he could have switched directions at that point. So in saying that, when the dog started barking at Holly Bever's house, I assume the reason they were sitting there on their knees looking at each other was because he was waiting to see if there was going to be somebody reacting to the ruckus that was happening.
That makes complete sense. And can I tell you something else that, like, okay, so this is in regards to just Daphne as a whole, by the way. Daphne, do you think that both Holly Bobo and Samantha Koenig are Daphnes?
Yes.
Okay, because that's where this goes, by the way. This comes up in Daphne. And the other thing that struck me after, you've made that observation and I listened to it and I went back through, because I remembered all those things happened. Now, I didn't put them together the way you did, but I remembered something else. That's less than a year apart. So what makes that even stronger for me, statistically speaking, is that Holly Bobo is April 2011. Samantha Koenig is 2012. Do you see what I mean?
I do.
And that makes it stronger to me. But do you think that, okay, so you think the dog barking is what made him do it with Holly Bobo, if he did it?
Well, I think, okay, so if it was Keith, and there's been people convicted of this murder, okay? Maybe they did it. I don't know. But I do know that over time, following very, not a lot, just when it showed up on, major, television news shows, following it just a little bit, it always stood out in my mind that Clint had this account that happened, and it was that when he looked out the window, he saw her kneeling in the carport, and there was a guy kneeling in front of her. She just sits around kneeling, facing people. It's weird.
It's rare, and it's...
So it stuck in my head, and because I thought, why didn't he go, hey, what are y'all doing? To me, it was just a really strange thing. And I know there was heat on him for a while, but I don't think he had anything to do with any of it. And, people have been convicted of this. However, if Israel Keys were to be responsible for Holly Bobo's disappearance and murder, as opposed to the people who were convicted, the reasoning would be that whenever there was the initial confrontation, and so I assume she was going out to her car, getting ready to leave. He probably appeared out of nowhere, and there was, whatever happened that made the dog start barking. And so I feel like that is the same thing as what went through his mind when he was hopping through the window at Common Grounds, when he thought he might have seen somebody who may have seen him. He wasn't sure, and he couldn't turn around and poke his head back out the window and see. He didn't want to take that chance. But similarly, when the dog started barking, he thought, okay, just stay right here, be calm. Let's see if somebody's going to come out of the house. Let's see if, let's see what's going to happen for, whatever amount of time, a few minutes, until he's sure that, because up until that point, he hasn't taken them anywhere. And so let's say Clint went out and said, hey, what's going on? He could have taken off, or he could have said, oh, my bad. I don't know what he would have said. But do you see what I'm saying? As far as it looks similar, because it's almost like it's just a brief pause between the abduction, his fear of getting caught, and then continuing on with his plan. That is something that makes sense to me as far as two people kneeling facing each other. Otherwise, why would they be doing that?
Well, it's also criminally sophisticated, because no matter how you look at that, him or not him, at Holly Bobo, someone there, I don't think is a meth head who's out of their damn mind. If they're that criminally sophisticated that they are pulling them down and waiting out a potential snafu, so to speak, that is a criminal who's practiced.
Well, have you ever heard of, what could another explanation for that be? I could understand her being kneeling down and a perpetrator making their victim kneel down. That is not really that big of a deal. But what I don't get is like why they would kneel down too. That's where it kind of throws my brain off.
So we started 2004 by looking at what could a killer possibly have encountered along the way that would make him engage in this behavior. And I found something. And someone else did a much better job writing this up than me, so I'll link their entire post in the show notes. From a consolidated post on Reddit, in the early hours of the morning on February 1st, 2004, 43-year-old Maria Hernandez of Newark, California, would leave for her 5 a.m. shift at work. As Maria did not have a driver's license, her boyfriend would routinely give her a ride to and from work. However, on this particular Sunday morning, Maria's boyfriend was unable to take her. As a result, Maria decided that she would walk the 4-mile distance from her Newark home to her workplace at Fremont Nursing Care Center. Although at some point during the morning, Maria's daughter, 19-year-old Carmen Hernandez, was made aware that her mother was about to walk to work. As Carmen considered it unsafe for her to walk alone at that hour of the morning, she volunteered to accompany her. Maria agreed, and the pair set off on their walk. As the temperatures were low that night, Maria and Carmen became too cold to travel further after what had now been a half hour of walking. At this point in their walk, they were a little less than halfway from the care center. Around 2:30 a.m., Carmen called her cousin, Helene Cuellar, and asked if she would be willing to give them a ride. Helene, who agreed to give them a ride during their initial phone call, called Carmen back to clarify their exact whereabouts once she arrived in Fremont. According to Helene, someone answered the phone, but there was no response. Helene heard screaming and footsteps on the other end and would never receive a response, while she helplessly and repeatedly asked what was wrong. The screams of the two women awoke local residents around 2:45 a.m. One resident, Jermaine Schaefer, went outside and saw a man striking the women with some sort of object at the intersection of Contra Costa Avenue and Alameda Drive. Schaefer said he yelled, "Hey," at the man and threw rocks at him in an attempt to get him to stop. The attacker then threw the weapon on top of the victims and ran northbound on Contra Costa Avenue. According to Schaefer, a vehicle was parked alongside the victims during the incident and appeared to occupy 3 other subjects. After the attacker fled the scene on foot, the vehicle started and headed westbound on Alameda Drive. Schaefer added that once the vehicle started, the headlights were off. Investigators believe this was done in an attempt to prevent any witnesses from taking note of their license plate. However, investigators can't say definitively whether or not the assailant and the 3 subjects in the vehicle are related to each other. The man standing over the bodies was described as white or Latino, in his early 20s, standing about 6 feet tall and weighing about 200 pounds. He wore a blue denim jacket with tan sleeves, dark gray stonewashed jeans, and white tennis shoes. The vehicle was described as a light-colored or metallic late 1980s or early 1990s Honda Accord. While one resident called 911, 2 others approached the women who were lying on the curb. Dick Wise, who lives a few doors down from where the brutal attack took place, said, "I checked for signs of life, but there was nothing. There was a humongous amount of blood and trauma to the head. Both women were lying face down on the pavement, about a foot apart. Carmen's midsection was exposed, and her pants were pulled down, but they were not completely removed. A pair of underwear, however, was lying next to her and looked as if it had been torn off." As there were no indications that sexual assault had taken place, investigators believe the torn clothes were the result of a struggle. While investigators had yet to describe the murder weapon to the public, according to the 2 neighbors that had inspected the scene, the murder weapon appeared to be a tree branch, about 3 inches in diameter and 30 inches long. Investigators would later confirm that a tree branch was in fact used to bludgeon the pair to death. Investigators believe the weapon was one of opportunity and was possibly available due to the trees in the neighborhood having been recently pruned or cut down. Maria's co-workers were said to have broken down into tears when they heard the devastating news. Maria had worked at the center for more than 3 years and was a conscientious employee. It was in character for Maria to walk to work rather than miss a shift. Investigators believe that either Maria or Carmen may have known their killer, though they have turned up short on potential leads. According to Detective Blass, everyone in relation to Maria and Carmen were thoroughly investigated, yet nothing of value surfaced. Unlike many homicides, nobody in either women's circle is considered a suspect. Blass said, "We've had leads through the years, sending us down different paths to where we're going. Each one's hit a dead end." Investigators have confirmed that DNA was collected from the tree branch that was used to murder Maria and Carmen. However, for what has now been on 16 years, they have been unable to match the sample to anyone. Blass said, "That leaves me to believe that person committed the crime and then fled somewhere or never committed another crime." Maria had come to the United States 8 years prior from a small town in Mexico. Maria believed that Alameda County would be a safe place for her to start fresh. Carmen, on the other hand, had only been in the U.S. for 8 months. According to Carmen's father, Leo Castillo, deal. He had urged her to stay in Mexico with her older sister. However, Carmen was determined to move to the United States to learn English and live with her mother. Carmen's older sister stayed in Mexico and lives there today. Maria and Carmen's case remains open and is still being actively investigated by the Fremont Police Department. 16 years later, the murders of Maria and Carmen Hernandez remain unsolved. Whether this is our killer or not, we won't know. But the bodies were found, and we are less interested in those and more interested in the bodies that have not yet been recovered. So let's cover the missing persons for 2004. And we'll start with two of the biggest cases in true crime history, right after an early morning boat trip goes wrong. Robert Jason McCrae was last seen in Seattle, Washington on February 7, 2004. He and his friend, Jason Lee Shawlock, went on an impromptu canoe trip on the Puget Sound at 4 o'clock a.m. McCrae called his girlfriend on his cellular phone to tell her about it. They never returned. Later that morning, Shawlock's body was pulled from the water at Alki Point. Authorities believe the canoe tipped over and he got tangled in a tow rope and drowned. There was no sign of McCrae, however. Investigators believe McCrae drowned also, but his body has never been recovered. Robert McCrae was 25 years old, 5 feet 10 inches tall, and weighed 130 pounds. He had brown hair and brown eyes. He goes by his middle name, Jason, and he may use the last name, Frazier. His case remains unsolved. Maura Murray was involved in a one-car accident on Route 112 in the Woodsville section of Haverhill in northern New Hampshire between 7 and 7:30 p.m. on February 9, 2004. Her car, a black 1996 Saturn with Massachusetts license plates, failed to negotiate a sharp curve and ran off the road, striking a tree. Haverhill is 5 miles away from Wells River, Vermont, and 1 mile away from Swiftwater Village by the Connecticut River. This was the second car Murray had wrecked inside of 3 days. She had previously damaged her father's vehicle in another accident. A resident near the site of the February 9th crash called the police, even though Murray had asked him not to. She had vanished by the time authorities arrived at the scene. About 10 minutes later, her car was left behind, severely damaged in the front end and not in a drivable condition. The doors were locked, and a few personal belongings, including Murray's cellular phone and credit and bank cards, were missing, but most of her possessions had been left inside. Murray has never been seen again, and there were no footprints in the snow around the car and no indications of a struggle, and tracker dogs lost her scent within 100 yards. Police believe she got a ride from the scene of the accident to parts unknown. The witness to the accident says she did not appear to be injured, but she may have been intoxicated. Murray resided in Hanson, Massachusetts, and was a student at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst at the time she disappeared. The university police are assisting with her case. She was a nursing major and a Dean's List student and was employed by a local art gallery, in addition to having a job on campus. She planned to take a nursing job in Oklahoma after graduation. 4 days before she disappeared, she left her job early at her supervisor's suggestion. She appeared to be extremely upset about something and was unable to work. It has not been discovered what was bothering her, but Murray's sister spoke to her on the phone that same evening and said their conversation was normal. Murray emailed her professors the day of her disappearance and said there was a death in her family and she had to go away, but would be in touch upon her return in about a week. No one had actually died. After her disappearance, Murray's dormitory room was found to be packed up, as if she was planning on moving out altogether. She withdrew $280 from her bank account the day she disappeared, but there has been no activity on her bank accounts or credit cards since then. She packed up all her belongings in her dormitory room into boxes and left behind a personal note for her fiancé, an Army lieutenant named William Roush, who was stationed in Oklahoma. Murray also emailed Roush on the afternoon of her disappearance. In the email, she asked to speak with him. The day after she was last seen, Murray called Roush, but he only heard her breathing on the line. The call could not be traced. Investigators inspected Murray's computer after she vanished. They discovered she'd been searching on the internet for information on hotels in the Burlington, Vermont area. Based on this information, they checked Burlington hotels for any signs of Murray, but turned up no clues as to her whereabouts. Murray and her father went hiking together in the Burlington area in the fall of 2003, but she has no other connections to the city. She used to camp regularly in New Hampshire and knew the state well, but there are no known reasons why she would go to Haverhill. Extensive searches of the woods around Haverhill have turned up no evidence as to her whereabouts. There is speculation that Murray's case may be related to the disappearance of Brianna Maitland, a girl who vanished from Montgomery, Vermont on March 19, 2004. She is still missing. Montgomery is only about 90 miles from Haverhill. Both of them are attractive, brunette young women, and both disappeared after car accidents in which their cars were left behind with personal items inside. The FBI met with local authorities to discuss possible links between the cases. However, they concluded that, despite the apparent similarities, the two females' cases were probably not connected to each other. The theory is not being entirely ruled out, but investigators believe it's an unlikely one. Murray was a student for 2 years at the United States Military Academy at West Point, where she met Rausch. Before she transferred to the University of Massachusetts, she had majored in chemical engineering at West Point. She is described as a quiet, introverted, and extremely athletic person. She may have been carrying a backpack at the time of her disappearance. Murray's family says it's uncharacteristic of her not to contact them, and they fear that she's being held against her will. She had not been having problems with her family or her boyfriend at the time she disappeared, and she has no history of mental illness. Police do not suspect that foul play was involved in Murray's disappearance. Both Massachusetts and New Hampshire authorities are investigating. Maura Murray was 21 years old, 5 feet 7 inches tall, and weighed 120 pounds. She has light brown hair and brown eyes. Her case remains unsolved. Brianna Alexandria Maitland was last seen at her dishwashing job at the Black Lantern Inn in Montgomery, Vermont, between 11:20 p.m. and midnight on March 19, 2004. Her co-workers asked her to have dinner with them, but she declined because she was tired and had to get up early to go to her second job as a waitress in St. Albans, Vermont. She left work and was supposed to go home, where she lived with a friend in Sheldon. She never arrived, and her friend assumed she had moved back in with her parents and brother in East Franklin, Vermont. The friend called Brianna's parents on March 23rd and found out Brianna wasn't there, and then reported her missing. Brianna's vehicle, a pale green 4-door 1985 Oldsmobile sedan, was found abandoned on March 20th off East Berkshire Road and Route 118, across Dutchburn Farm Road, about a mile outside of Montgomery. It was parked partially inside an abandoned barn. 2 of Brianna's uncashed paychecks were on the front seat of the car. She also left behind all her clothing, her medicine, driver's license, her makeup, and her contact lenses. Some of her belongings were strewn on the ground in front of the car. A woman's fleece jacket was found in a field near Brianna's car, but it apparently did not belong to her. The Oldsmobile had sustained minor damage. It had apparently backed into the building and punctured a hole in the wall. Investigators later came to believe the accident may have been staged. Police did not initially report the abandoned car to Brianna's mother, who was the registered owner. They noticed Brianna's paychecks inside the vehicle and guessed that she was the primary driver. So they went to her place of work to try to find her and tell her about the car. The abandoned Oldsmobile and Brianna's disappearance were not connected until her disappearance was reported 3 days later. About 3 weeks before Brianna disappeared, she was reportedly attacked by a female acquaintance in front of several witnesses. The reasons for the assault are unclear. Brianna did not try to defend herself, although she has had several years of martial arts training. After the attack, she went to the hospital and received treatment for facial cuts, 2 black eyes, and a concussion. She filed a criminal complaint against her alleged attacker. The case was still pending when Brianna disappeared. After she vanished, the district attorney dropped the complaint against the objections of Brianna's parents. There's a possibility that Brianna left of her own accord. She mentioned to her friends plans for possibly making a short trip out of the area. She is described as an independent, restless young woman who was unhappy in her rural surroundings, and she has run away before. Brianna passed her GED exam on the day of her disappearance, and she planned to attend college part-time. Authorities believe she was a victim of foul play, and her disappearance may be drug-related, as drugs are very common in the Montgomery area. Brianna's parents also think she came to harm, but they maintain that drugs were not a factor in her disappearance. Her parents separated after her disappearance, and her mother now lives in New York. Some agencies report that Brianna vanished from East Franklin or Sheldon, Vermont. Brianna Maitland was 17 years old, 5 foot 4 inches tall, and around 110 pounds. She had been taking medication for migraine headaches at the time of her disappearance. That medication was left behind. She has brown hair, hazel eyes, and a faint scar extending from her left eyebrow to her forehead. Her left nostril is pierced. She wore a small ringer stud in it at the time of her disappearance. She wears contact lenses, but they were left behind when she vanished. Her case remains unsolved. These cases take place in the killer's stomping grounds. But what if he didn't do that? What else might he have been doing? Richard Guy Campbell was reported missing after having not been seen or heard from in nearly 2 months, sometime in early 2004. He was last seen alive on February 10th of 2004. Few details are available in his case. Richard Campbell was 34 years old. He was 5 feet 11 inches tall and weighed 145 pounds. He had brown hair and hazel eyes. He went missing from Bend, Oregon, in Deschutes County. His case remains unsolved. There was either something happening in New York that seemed like this killer. Although it's unlikely he was involved, it's interesting enough to take a look at.
News 10 NBC learned today investigators think the fire started here in the back of 17 Yates Street. That's where 8-year-old Savannah Strieber was sleeping, and that's where she was found.
Come on, come on, come on, come on!
Kathleen Rockefeller feels like she can't get away from this grief. She lives right across the street, and she's trying to help her own children cope.
Adam feels like he didn't say enough nice things to her while she was still here. And he says when he looks up, like today, he said, it's sunny out, Mom. I think she's smiling down at us.
A lot of people have been coming by today to take a look at this house, and the front is basically intact, and that is very misleading, because all you need to do is walk towards the back of the house, a little pathway on the side, and you can see how bad the damage is and how intense that fire was. Firefighters say there was no working smoke alarm. The landlord, Joseph Vaccaro Jr., says the alarms worked when the family moved in. We checked into other Vaccaro properties. One is here, 185 Willow Creek Lane in Irondequoit. The house is new and doesn't look occupied. Vaccaro also owns this house on Washington Avenue in Irondequoit. The tenant here says there are 4 working smoke alarms. State law says owners need to provide smoke alarms in every single family home. The law says nothing about how long the grief will linger.
We're going to be grieving for a very long time. Our children are asking more questions. There were a lot of tears last night, finally.
Savannah Strieber was a favorite of the parents who lived in this East Side neighborhood. One of her mother's former friends was not as popular. Kathleen Rockefeller spoke to the man several times. She says the man was abusive to Savannah's mother and the end of the relationship was messy.
He made it very clear to everyone in the neighborhood if he couldn't have her, no one could.
The night of the fire, Savannah's mother, Lisa Routier, was at work. Savannah was at home with 2 other children and an adult babysitter named Shonda Whitaker. Rockefeller, who lives across the street, remembers what the house looked like.
All the lights were off and Lisa's car was gone, so it didn't look like anyone was home. So whoever started this fire didn't really think about what they were doing.
Today, police confirmed the fire was intentionally set.
No question in our minds right now that this fire was intentionally set. Whether or not the young girl was the intended victim or not, we don't know. But we do know that that fire was definitely intentionally set.
We asked police about the mother's former friend.
We have talked to him.
Is he a suspect in this?
No, everybody's a suspect and nobody's a suspect, you know. We don't rule anybody out.
Have you questioned him?
Yes, we've talked to him.
Are you continuing to speak with him?
We may in the future, but it all depends on where our investigation leads.
Shonda Whitaker hopes the investigation leads to an arrest. The babysitter who was inside the house that night says she tried to get Savannah out. The fact she couldn't has haunted her ever since. Even a potential arrest is hard for her to talk about.
I'm hoping that something's going to come out of this. I really am. Because I couldn't imagine what the reason would be for someone starting that fire like that.
We took a look at a couple more unsolved murders and arsons in 2004, but let's finish up the missing persons first.
Jennifer K. Wicks and her daughter, Adriana Wicks, were last seen together between 9 and 9:30 p.m. on March 25, 2004. Jennifer's live-in boyfriend, William Benton, initially stated that Jennifer and Adriana left home with an unknown individual. He later altered his story and said that he and Jennifer had an argument. He dropped her and Adriana off at an Exxon gas station near exit 112 off Interstate 65 in Cross Plains, Tennessee. After 5 to 10 minutes, Adriana and Jennifer got into a white 4-door early 90s model mid-sized car. Benton stated that Jennifer went to their home without Adriana the next afternoon. She was driving the car she'd gotten into the previous day. She asked for her income tax return, but her boyfriend's parents were not at home to give her the money, so she left. She said that she would come back for it, but she never did. Jennifer and Adriana have never been heard from again. Neither of them had any personal items, money, or extra clothes with them when they disappeared. Jennifer and Adriana are believed to be in danger, as it is uncharacteristic of Jennifer to be out of touch with her family. Jennifer Wicks was 21 years old, 5 feet 5 inches tall, and weighed 130 pounds. She has brown hair and brown eyes. She wears eyeglasses with silver, oval-shaped wire frames. She has a tribal tattoo on her lower back. Her ears are pierced twice, and her tongue is pierced. Adriana Wicks was 2 years old, with brown hair and blue-green eyes. Their cases remain unsolved. Amber Elizabeth Cates was last seen in Maury County, Tennessee on April 11, 2004. She left her mother's home in the 2300 block of Tracy Lane with James Gordon, one of her friends, in a gold Mazda with a license plate number PFB200. She was supposed to return in 2 days, but never did, and has never been heard from again. When questioned about Amber's disappearance, Gordon said he'd left her with another friend, Ronald California Inzuriaga. They were supposed to get a meal at the Waffle House restaurant on James Campbell Boulevard. Authorities have since located Inzuriaga in a federal prison in Alabama. He said he dropped Amber off at a garage in Columbia, Tennessee after she purchased hair dye, and he doesn't know what happened to her after that. Amber was born in Spring Hill, Tennessee, and lived in several states, then returned to Tennessee to live in a foster home. Her older half-sister Brenda James stated that Amber had gotten involved with the wrong crowd and was drinking and occasionally using drugs. James became her legal guardian just a few days before she went missing. Amber was originally considered to be a runaway, but the passage of time since her disappearance has led investigators to consider whether other factors caused her to disappear. She has a driver's license, but there have been no infractions listed on her driving record. Her social security number has gone unused since 2004, and she has not used her cellular phone either. James believes Amber is deceased. If she's alive, she may be in Georgia or Texas, or she may still be in the Maury County area. Amber Cates was 16 years old, 5 feet 5 inches tall, and weighed 100 pounds. She has light brown hair and hazel eyes. Her hair may be dyed blonde, and her case remains unsolved. Irma Rosario Munetin Cueto was last seen at her residence in the vicinity of the 4100 block of West Wash Palace in Denver, Colorado on April the 15th, 2004. She has never been heard from again, and few details are available in her case. Irma Munetin Cueto was 34 years old, 5 foot 3 inches tall, and weighs 120 pounds. She has brown hair and brown eyes. She wears wire-framed glasses. Her nickname is Cheetah. Her case remains unsolved. From the website strangemaine.blogspot.com. From February 22, 2011, The Mystery of Jeremy Alex. The television show Disappeared focused on a 2004 missing persons case from Maine. Jeremy Alex, 28, disappeared from Northport. Since then, his father has started the Jeremy Alex Fund with the purpose of helping at-risk kids. The Bangor Daily News revisits the story. TV show to air about Maine man who disappeared in 2004. Almost 7 years ago, Jeremy Alex disappeared in the woods of Northport under mysterious circumstances. Despite a $20,000 reward for information on his whereabouts, his family is still left with many questions, no answers, and no Jeremy. They hope that a television program about him that airs on the Investigation Discovery Channel's series Disappeared will change that. There's not too many things left to do that will spark an interest again, his father Ted Alex said Friday from Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where he lives. We're optimistic. Hopefully somebody will call and give us some information. Jeremy, a landscaper who is in the process of moving to Northport from Islesboro, was 28 when he was last seen running into the woods off of Pound Hill Road the evening of April 24, 2004. Although the disappearance was treated initially as a missing persons case, his family believes that the man they describe as kind and a free spirit may have been murdered. Deputies found Jeremy's car nearby, but were unable to locate him. A search was mounted immediately, but nothing was found. After the public was notified that Jeremy was missing, a second witness recalled seeing a man who matched his description run across Route 1 near Northport Marine at about the same time. That area was also searched extensively, but nothing was found. For years, there were no more reliable clues, Ted Alex said. But about 2.5 years ago, Jeremy's driver's license surfaced at a home on the shore in Northport, along with a story of a missed opportunity. In 2004, a Northport couple were building a house on the ocean, and about a month after Jeremy disappeared, money started washing up on shore. Workers found around $30 in all. About 2 weeks after that, Jeremy's driver's license washed up as well. The couple had a bowl on their coffee table that was filled with everything that had floated in on the tide. They put the license and the money in there. They never made the connection to the missing man. But after the husband died, friends came to a get-together after his funeral. A retired highway patrol officer saw the driver's license in the bowl and remembered hearing about Jeremy. He called the police, Ted Alex said. He ended up emailing me about it, saying, I have $30 of Jeremy's money and his license, which was obviously really bizarre. The $20,000 reward, too, has led to nothing more tangible than rumors. Jeremy is remembered as a nice guy who struggled with addiction but loved snowboarding, chess, music, gardening, and Maine. Anyone with information about Jeremy Alex should call Trundy at the Waldo County Sheriff's Office or visit jeremyalex.com. The Jeremy Alex episode of Disappeared aired at 9 p.m. on Monday, February 7th, 2011 on the Discovery Channel.
And this next one is not a missing persons case, but it is a bizarre murder.
These are the photographs taken at a house outside Mooresville on a spring day.
One of the interviews.
These detectives have looked at these pictures dozens of times. Ronlee Ratliff was 24 and a conscientious young lady, not happy about what she saw going on around her.
She had made some statements previously about some drug activity. The speculation at that time during the investigation was those statements came back on her.
She didn't die as a result of the fire. She was dead before the fire.
I was a little surprised and taken back by what first impression was, seeing what was there. It wasn't a whole lot of fire. It was actually relatively small.
This is the Morgan County Sheriff's Cold Case Squad, formed about a year ago, and their first assignment was to solve the murder of Ronlee Ratliff. Rich Whitmer is the former Beech Grove police chief. Dan Riffle was a Martinsville detective who was working that day. Darrell Brown was an arson investigator called out to the house. Ronlee's body was found in the living room.
Now starting to look through the reports and see what's here now, I'm probably going to lose more sleep now than I would previously looking at this case.
Investigators in Mooresville say there's a lot of people that want the murder of Ronlee Ratliff solved. Maybe a few who don't. It's the job of the cold case unit to figure out who's who and why.
We have a box. We have access to everything that has been developed to this point in time. But we still are uncovering evidence. We sometimes still get some tips, and we follow those up as best we can.
The most recent was a new name came into play. There's some individuals we have not reached out to yet. We've heard statements that they will not be happy with it being reopened.
Do you think the answer to Ronlee Ratliff's murder is somehow sitting right here in front of us?
I do. Absolutely. I believe it's laying right here.
The cold case detectives have 40 names and a couple dozen pieces of evidence at their disposal that nobody but the cops and the killer have seen. The investigators are all reserve volunteers with more than 70 years of experience between them, decades of asking why. They're still burning with the itch to right an old wrong and bring the killer of a young woman to justice.
This is, I think, an opportunity for me to maybe one time feel like I'm getting a little piece of something back that I've not been able to accomplish in the past.
Somebody in Mooresville hopes they fail. Cold case crew bets it won't.
I had looked at Elsha, I think it was Elsha Rivera and Andrea Cotton and Stacy Carson. They were all down in Texas. And I was thinking, okay, so if he didn't go Vermont side or Maine or whatever, if he's not, responsible for like Maura Murray, then who could it be? And I went down through California. I chased down some custody cases that were going on over there, and I had a bunch of border jumpers that I looked at in that time period, like a bunch of them. And there was even a group that got like robbed, and I was like, would he do something like that? And it wasn't that I thought he wouldn't, but there was a Kylene case, a Fort Worth case, and there was another Texas case, and they were all maybes. I didn't cover them because, well, I did cover them. I don't think they're him because they had, like, one of them disappeared with two people, and then the others there was so little information available about the cases. And I've mentioned them, as we go along. I actually think that Stacey Lynn Carson might be one of the unidentified people that I hunted up that was in a house. There was a mummified body in a house. Either her or Elsha Rivera or Andrea Cotton, like they could all be right there in that area. I just didn't end up, I don't know, I didn't get the feeling from any of them that they were his. It doesn't mean he didn't go back down to Texas because I do think I like him for several things down there. But I didn't end up having him in Texas.
A better description would be that I didn't have him in Texas in early 2004. But I did have some weird stuff going on elsewhere in the country. We'll come back to Texas later. And then there was another weird one in Colorado.
He was just selected by this killer.
Targeted and then tortured.
His hands were elaborately tied to his ankles.
Stabbed 22 times.
Cut his throat, almost severed his head.
Details about a crime scene that are just as vivid as the day Detective Tom Sobieski responded.
A lot of trauma. The coroner felt it went on for hours.
Police found Oakley Al Kite Jr. in the basement of his Aurora townhome on May 22nd, 2004. He never showed up for work. His girlfriend couldn't believe it when she heard the word murder.
The first thing I thought of was the roommate.
It's the first thing investigators thought of, too.
So we knew it was the renter who was probably our suspect, and he probably killed him with his own kitchen knives.
Detectives found those knives in his sink, sitting in bleach, along with a key that Al gave to the renter.
Yes.
Girlfriend Linda Angelopoulos remembers Al taking out an ad in the paper listing his basement for rent. And she remembers something odd about a man who looked at the place.
The night the guy came over, I also came over.
Linda walked in, went to the bathroom, and he was gone. Looking back now, she doesn't think the man wanted her to see him.
Well, yeah, I think that's what happened. I mean, he's walking out the door, didn't even turn around to say hi, bye, or anything. And how long does it take to go to the bathroom and wash your hands?
That's not all. Investigators found out the renter used the name Robert Cooper, and they found out something else that might make your skin crawl.
So we don't know what selection criteria he used to pick his victim, but we knew he met with Al and he met with some other people. He met with older women, different locations, some were houses.
A hand-picked victim, a brutal killing. They believe it was all planned out. Police say the man showered at the home after the murder, then used Al's car to drive to a nearby ATM where he took out $1,000.
I'm sure a lot of people think about the way that he died and what he had to go through. For what? For what? For the thrill of it? I don't think it was for the $1,000 he took. I think it was for the thrill of it.
Surveillance video from the ATM was useless. The suspect was wearing a ski mask and surgical gloves.
We don't think robbery was the motive. We think that the suspect was looking for someone to kill, actually.
Along the way, the suspect led police astray as they chased cell phone records for a burner phone purchased at 9th and Colorado. A phone that was ultimately left on Colfax, then ended up in the hands of homeless people. But 15 years later, detectives still have hope that DNA found at the murder scene could lead to the suspect, thanks to new technology.
We have a sketch of what we think the suspect may look like from his DNA profile. And most recently, I've been working with the FBI. They have an investigative genealogy unit.
Through genetic genealogy, they can analyze the suspect's DNA in an attempt to trace his family tree and ultimately find him. It's how investigators in California found the Golden State Killer.
Their scientists and experts with the FBI can narrow that search down.
Detective Sobieski says until that happens, this case is always on his mind.
I think it's because Al was such a true victim. Everybody said he was a really nice guy.
A future stolen by a renter turned killer.
We're going to find him. They're going to find him. I just know it.
Liz Gilardi, Denver 7.
2004, in one way, it's the year of the witness. There's a lot of things that I think happened with him and witnesses, but it's also sort of the year of the idiot when it comes to serial killers, because you got Joel Patrick Courtney in the Brooke Willenberger case, which is an awful case, and then down in the New Orleans area, you've got Sean Vincent Gillis, and him. I had some trouble differentiating these two. Gillis is high on my list to have more victims, and then there's this whole Al Kite thing. So the Al Kite thing, what made that interesting for me was, first of all, he's already arguing with baby mama. I think that's been going on for close to a year at this point. So arguing with her, I took him up to the one murder in Canada, Iggy Leonardo case. But what if the flip side of that is he does start trying crazy stuff after he moves into his own place in Nia Bay? Because it would be the right time frame for the Al Kite murder. What if he's not Robert Cooper? But what if Robert Cooper was also a victim? What if he killed both of them? And Al Kite was just left behind for time or whatever. Like, because, you know, is he the guy in the ATM too? I don't know. I couldn't tell you. But I liked him for that, like, to some degree, because it's such a weird murder. But also, just in general, his MO is going to be changing up. He's going to be trying new things because, you know, he gets to vote in less than a year. And, you know, that changes the body disposal briefly. I don't think it changes it for the whole of his crime span, but it definitely changes it, like, for that time frame. So what if Al Kite and Robert Cooper, whoever that was, both got murdered? That'd be interesting, right? And that would make me lean more towards him. Although I have a killer operating in that area during that time that's not this guy. So that's a different thing. Like, when I was mapping all this out, this is a year that I knew I was getting good at this because I was trying to, like, remove all the preconceptions and stuff. And I put the year together for myself, like, going through all this different case paperwork. I was like, well, all right, what do I need to look at? Like, what else do I need to do? And, you know, there's some weird, like, cases that, like, are probably not related, but they're interesting. So I'd gotten, like, all through 2004, and I was like, why the hell is there this gap? And I couldn't figure out what it was. And then I did my little going down the list, and I was like, this doesn't make any sense. I've missed something. Because, you know, there's a lot of things that could account for that, but, like, I didn't know what they were. And until you had gone through, like, the FBI stuff, I didn't have a clue. I was just like, why is there nothing in, like, June? And sure enough, when I get to the reading and, like, going through, like the file summaries and going through, like, the books and stuff that came out, which is way later, like years later, it's like, oh, in the summer of 2004, he broke up with his baby mama and he moved, like, to a house nearby. And then they went, like, you know, and spent time where there was pictures and everything where we could document him. Not pictures of him committing crimes, but pictures of him elsewhere. He was up in, like, Maine with the family. And I was like, holy shit, that's why that hole is there. Because I never could figure out what it was before. And then I was like, I wonder if he killed escorts during that time or anything. I couldn't find anything. And sure enough, once, I think it was American Predator, where I finally, like, it clicked for me, like, oh, that's one of the holes I had. Like, it's probably a real hole. It's probably a real time when he wasn't doing anything. So, you know, 2004 was sort of eventful, except for that.
And these cases started to make me think, I really hope that the FBI has the killer's DNA entered into CODIS. But I haven't been able to confirm that that's the case.
Molly Laura Datillo dropped off an employment application at a Wendy's fast food restaurant near 10th Street and Highway 465 in Indianapolis at 7:00 p.m. on July 6, 2004. She also purchased supplies for schools and for her hobbies and dropped one of the 3 classes she was taking at Indiana University, as it was the last day to drop a class without a penalty. At 11:00 p.m., she placed a call from a payphone at a Thornton's gas station in the 5700 block of Crawfordsville Road. The call was to a friend, but the line was disconnected when the friend picked up the phone. She's never been heard from again. All of Datillo's personal belongings, including her car, voice practice equipment, cellular phone, wallet, bank card, contact lens solution, and identification, were left behind when she vanished. She had left additional job applications inside of her vehicle. She had taken her cellular phone with her when she left her brother's apartment, and it was found later in his home, which indicates that she may have made it back there. Datillo's brother was not immediately concerned when his sister did not come home to Westlake Apartments that night, as she had gone on impromptu short visits to people in the past. He did not report her missing until July 8, 2 days after she was last seen. Datillo was a student at Eastern Kentucky University in 2004. She was in her 5th year and was very close to graduating. She had enrolled in the school on a running scholarship, which expired in 2003. Datillo was taking summer classes at Indiana University and Purdue University at Indianapolis at the time of her disappearance. She was also taking private voice lessons. She attended all of her classes and lessons up until the day she disappeared. She was preparing to audition for the American Idol contest in August of 2004 and also planned to attend her nephew's birthday party, which happened later in July. She left a substantial amount of money behind in her bank account, which has not been accessed since she disappeared. In October of 2008, authorities announced they were investigating Datillo's case as a homicide. They had a person of interest in her case, the last known person to have been seen with her. He was with her when she placed the call at the gas station. He has a criminal record for theft and other traffic offenses, and his driver's license has been suspended for life. He was a friend of one of Datillo's friends. The two of them met on the day of her disappearance, and they went on a boat ride and ate dinner together at a Taco Bell restaurant. No criminal charges have ever been filed in Datillo's disappearance. However, in November 2010, this man and his father were found civilly liable for her wrongful death in order to pay $3.4 million to her family. The Datillo family alleged that he had committed battery on her, which led to her death, but his family never came to court to defend themselves against the suit. A default judgment was issued against them. He is currently in prison on unrelated charges, and his father's whereabouts are unknown. Datillo is the youngest of 9 children and a native of Madison, Indiana. She is an excellent student, runner, and singer, and is described as a very social and trusting person. Her loved ones believe she was abducted, as it is extremely uncharacteristic of her to leave without warning. Molly Datillo was 22 years old, 5 feet tall, and weighed 100 pounds. She has brown hair and hazel green eyes. At the time of her disappearance, she had blonde highlights in her hair. She wears clear contact lenses or occasionally eyeglasses. Her case remains unsolved.
And here's another case from that same day, roughly.
15-year-old girl disappeared from a local pool. The search for her continues. News Press has been following that case ever since, and I have been following it closely for the last 5 years. Now, new information has prompted me to revisit the case and take what I found to police.
The summer of 2004. Teenagers were listening to Usher on their way to see the latest Harry Potter movie. And 15-year-old Ashley Martinez was setting out with her little brother for a day of fun at Krug Pool in St. Joseph. But that fun wouldn't last.
I dropped her off, her and her brother, and when I returned that afternoon to pick them both back up, he was here, but she was gone.
In the days that followed, a police report was filed. Friends were called, literally every thinkable avenue explored. But still, no Ashley.
I mean, at first, we kind of took it as a runaway situation, and I don't doubt at first it was.
And there was a story that made the theory Ashley had simply run away make sense. Story Ashley's mother, Tammy Mack, hadn't heard before her daughter went missing. A story that involved a possible relationship with an older man. Ashley's little brother said she'd left the pool of her own free will and gotten into a car with a friend. Ashley's mother says that friend was then 32-year-old Christopher Hart.
We do have proof that she was had gotten in that car with him. And that was the last time we've seen her.
Currently serving a 15-year sentence in a Missouri prison for assault and tampering with a motor vehicle, Christopher Matthias Hart was, even then, no stranger to law enforcement. Police tell us they can't comment on Ashley's case because it remains open. And the current investigator, Sergeant Jason Strong, wouldn't say whether Christopher Hart was or had ever been considered a suspect in Ashley's disappearance.
I can tell you, it's somebody's right whether they talk to us or not. They have the right to remain silent. They don't have to. But to confirm whether we've spoken with them or not, I can't. And to tell you any details, if he did, we couldn't.
But Tammy Mack says investigators did try to question Hart, but that he wouldn't cooperate.
She goes up to see him. He refuses to see her, and out the door she goes. They've tried a couple of times throughout all these years. 2 to my knowledge. 2.
15 years and 3 lead investigators later, thousands of tips have been investigated. The mystery and pain still as fresh to Tammy Mack as if it happened just yesterday. And then a glimmer of hope, at least for closure. Sergeant Strong announced a search in connection to the case on the north side of St. Joseph back in June of this year. What it turned up?
I have no idea. I mean, the only thing he did tell me, the detective said, is it was of value. I mean, I'm not sure what he means by that.
News of the search spread through social media. And while we don't know what, if anything, was discovered, it did uncover something. Another story.
Well, I'd heard of what had happened to Ashley, and I knew a lot about what was going on, like who she went with, and because it was my cousin that she went with.
More on that later tonight. Well, more on my look into the Ashley Martinez investigation and my interview with the woman who says she has information about the case. Police never heard until I took it to them. We'll also talk about my attempts to contact the man Ashley's mother believes was the last to see her daughter before she went missing.
Well, I'd heard of what had happened to Ashley, and I knew a lot about what was going on, like who she went with, and because it was my cousin that she went with.
This is Julie Walgren. She says Christopher Hart is her cousin. The man Ashley Martinez's mother believes is the last person to have seen her missing daughter.
Well, Well, I remember going over to Chris's house. He told me he'd met a girl. She was there, and he told me he'd met her at Krug Park, or Krug Pool. And the next day, or a couple days later, maybe, I went back over there, and she was there again, and they were talking about going to Oregon.
And she says she agreed to go with him, but then backed out at the last minute.
The day we were supposed to go, he came to the house, and I changed my mind. I had a bad feeling. Something in my gut told me not, I shouldn't go, and I just didn't want to do that. Something just told me not to go.
She says that bad feeling originated during a walk in the woods she'd taken with Christopher Hart, that he told her stories about bringing another girl to the same spot that just didn't sit well with her. After telling Hart she no longer wanted to go on the trip to Oregon, she says he left her house and headed to Krug Pool to pick up Ashley Martinez.
I know, because I was there. I know that she was going with Chris. I know that it was planned. We were all at the house talking about it. And I know he went because he stopped by the house to get me, and I changed my mind.
And at least that part of the story police had never heard. So we showed our interview with Julie Walgren to lead investigator Sergeant Jason Strong.
It's something that kind of blows my mind after all this time that we wouldn't have identified this witness in the case. You never know what's going to break a case like this. It could be something that she thinks fairly insignificant that could really help us out, put the piece of the puzzle together for us.
Looking at that puzzle, we went back to the story told to us by Julie Walgren. The one about the walk in the woods she says she took with Christopher Hart, where he told her the story that made her feel so uneasy. Walgren says that took place in the woods near Northwest Parkway. And that's certainly interesting because
that area is less than 2 miles away from this area that would eventually be searched by police just a few months ago in connection to this case. Sergeant Strong tells us they followed up on leads into this case as recently as just a few weeks ago. And now that he's heard Julie Walgren's story from us, he tells us he wants to hear it from her.
We attempted to contact Christopher Hart in prison to respond to the story Walgren told us, and we tried to speak with the attorney who represented him in his last legal case. Neither got back to us. Meanwhile, the search continues, and it's clear new information is out there. But the question remains the same. What happened to Ashley Martinez?
I feel like something's been with me this whole time. With the memory there still fresh, and I don't know, maybe Ashley's spirit's with me.
I mean, it's been 13 years. I'd like to know, I'd like to bring her home. Of course, I'm praying that she's alive and well, but either way, regardless, we need to get her home. And just having the answers, that we seek for so long.
For News Press Now, I'm Alex Flippin.
And then about a month later, in Jenner, California, there was a bizarre double murder.
We are disappointed that he is dead and that we can't actually talk to him.
Now to a major development in the brutal murder of a missionary couple with ties to West Michigan. Zeeland resident Jason Allen and his fiancée, Lindsay Kutzel, were found murdered on a remote Northern California beach in the summer of 2004, still zipped up in their sleeping bags. Today, we are learning a person of interest in that case, a man known for years as the cookie burglar, Joseph Burgess, was shot and killed in a shootout with police. A New Mexico deputy also died in that gunfight. Tonight, we're going to take a look at the man who eluded police for years and other crimes he is tied to. But we're going to begin with 24-hour News 8's Brett Thomas, who's been following this story since it broke back in 2004. He is in the newsroom right now with Brian Sterling. Brian?
Yeah, Susan, Brett, in fact, flew out to Northern California in the days after the murders, and he stayed around for us this afternoon to report on this story. The police in California calling him not a suspect, a person of interest, but certainly he fits the suspect profile almost to a T.
Yeah, he fits that MO that they were looking for from day one when we were out in California looking to investigate this story. They said they were looking for a drifter. That's exactly what this guy was. The problem here, though, is that the answers that Jason Allen and Lindsay Kutzel's parents may have been looking for might have died in the mountains of New Mexico.
They weren't there to catch a killer, just to nab a man only known as the Cookie Bandit, a person who was breaking into cabins to steal supplies. A burglar, not a murderer. But a surveillance mission in the mountains of New Mexico turned into a gunfight. In the end, a deputy and an unknown man lay dead. That man, police found as they investigated the scene, a suspect in the murders of Jason Allen and Lindsay Cutchell. A 5-year mystery perhaps solved. 62-year-old Joseph Burgess, a survivalist, a drifter, a man who fit the M.O. police had developed half a decade ago. They had reason to believe he could have done it. But was he ever in Northern California? There's no way to tell. On August 18, 2004, Jason and Lindsay were shot in their sleep as they camped beneath the stars. It was on this stretch of sand known as Fishhead Beach that 2 shots were fired, and 2 Christian counselors who were wed were sentenced to death by someone for some unknown reason, the mystery perplexing investigators for all that time. Allen's parents marking each anniversary without resolution, but even if this is the man who took their son's life, the biggest question may never be resolved.
Even if they do determine that it was him, that's only half the mystery, because now that he's dead, we may never know exactly why he would have chosen to kill our children.
Bob and Dolores are holding back hope, still skeptical. They've been down this road before. Will there be evidence for a definitive link? Where's that rifle police say the killer used? It wasn't with Burgess. Will there be a DNA match? Evidence was found at the crime scene in California, but nobody knows for sure if it came from the person who pulled the trigger. There have been promising leads before, and there have been many hopes dashed. Now 2 families wait as investigators begin a daunting task.
Brad, take us through some of those other promising leads. I recall a diary that was found with some ominous sketching in it. They released the evidence at one point in time looking for the particular gun. Take us through some of the developments over the years.
Well, almost immediately, they were looking for a suspect who was from Wisconsin. He was a 21-year-old. He was a drifter. He fit kind of the M.O. He was in Jenner, California. They thought that was the guy. They found him. They questioned him. Wasn't it?
Didn't pan out.
As far as that book you're talking about, at the top of those hills there where you go down to the beach, there's a sign-in book where you can just sign in and say, you know, I've been here before. They had people. They just had some writings in there like I am Spider-Man and some other writings that were kind of ominous, or some pictures that were drawn in there. They wanted to know who had drawn those pictures. We don't know if they ever found those people or not. And down on the beach, there are drawings down there that are very scary looking, of skeletons and devil heads and that sort of thing. They were looking for people the person who put those on there. They thought maybe that could be the person who did it. Overall, there have been all sorts of leads. There have been suspects that have come and gone. There have been people who have wanted to take revenge on a friend or a boyfriend or a husband by saying that they did it, and so police investigate that. The Allen family gets phone calls, you know, relatively often of possibilities that are going on, but those don't pan out. They're now going to go out to California for the anniversary. We're going to be headed that way as well.
All right, Brett, thank you. Fascinating development, regardless. We appreciate you sticking around today.
One of those stories that you don't want to miss out on, one that you will never forget. It's burned in your memory.
Absolutely. Brett Thomas reporting for us tonight. Susan.
Maybe that's the solution, but then this happened.
This isn't something that I was expecting to happen. I'd kind of given up hope.
2 murders unsolved for 13 years, but tonight, a break in the case. A suspect is now in jail for the 2004 killings of an engaged couple in Sonoma County.
The victims were workers at a Christian camp in El Dorado County, and they were on a camping visit on the coastal town of Jenner when they were killed. New tonight, CBS 13's Angela Greenwood joins us now. She has more on today's developments.
Yeah, Sam and Adrian, it was a gruesome and random murder, and investigators say they're now confident they've got the guy who did it. A friend of the couple who ran the camp they worked at also telling us today he had hope all along that the killer would be caught.
Friday, a major breakthrough in a case that went cold for 13 years.
There's a lot of joy and happiness that there's been resolution, and of course for the families.
Sean Gallen, a 38-year-old man from Forestville, is now in jail for allegedly killing Jason Allen and his fiancee Lindsay Cutchell while they slept on a secluded beach in Jenner in Sonoma County. It happened back in 2004. The couple in their 20s from the Midwest had been working at a Christian youth camp in Coloma in El Dorado County. In a 2005 interview, CBS 13 talked with the camp employee who hired them.
It'd be nice to know, but at the same time, I'm personally a little scared of imagining putting a face to the question of why.
Today, camp director Craig Lomax reacted to news of an arrest.
I was excited. This isn't something that I was expecting to happen. I'd kind of given up hope. and yet then other feelings come in.
Police arrested the suspect Gannon last month for allegedly killing his brother. Investigators say he had been a person of interest in the young couple's murders early on, so they questioned him again.
He had information about the killings that no other person could have known, and we have located evidence that corroborates his statement.
What still remains a mystery is why. Detectives say more details will come out in court, but for now, a sense of closure for family and friends mixed with sadness as emotions from 13 years ago flood back to surface.
The parents of both Jason and Lindsay did release a statement today saying they are extremely pleased that their children's killer is in custody where he belongs. Gallen has not yet been charged with the murders as the district attorney's office still needs to review this case. So.
Well, you have to think the parents are surprised by this too,
Oh,
so many years later.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right, Angela, thanks so much for that report.
And there was one more strange murder to take a look at that's still unsolved.
From the HeraldNet.com on August 22, 2005. Victim in slaying, not forgotten. When Kelly Sarston didn't show up for work, her friends were worried enough to search her property. Their worry turned to heartache when investigators found Sarston's remains submerged in the Pilchuck River, not far from her home. That was over a year ago. Snohomish County Sheriff's detectives continue to hunt for the woman's killer. It isn't a cold case. We're working on it, said Sheriff's Deputy and spokesman Rich Nybush. The woman's family has been in contact with detectives on a weekly basis, said Judy Stevenson, Sarston's sister. She definitely is not forgotten at all, Stevenson said. We want it solved. We want that person who killed her found. Sarston, 37, was well known in the Lake Stevens area, where she lived for more than a decade before she moved to her home a couple of years ago. About 50 neighbors and friends gathered in January for a vigil to remember Sarston, who was described as a sweet and trusting woman. The mourners called for justice to be served to whomever had murdered their friend. We aren't going to stop until we find out what happened. We'll never find closure until the person who did this is caught, neighbor Jerry McAllister told the Herald in January. The medical examiner's office hasn't released how Sarston died, only saying she died of homicidal violence. Friends reported Sarston missing August 19, 2004, when she didn't show up for work. Sarston owned and operated Extreme Rock, a trucking company. Detectives searched Sarston's house, locating a sandal on a trail leading down to the river, according to a search warrant. A search dog led investigators to the area where Sarston's body was found in a stagnant pool of water. Anyone with information about the death of Kelly Sarston is asked to call the Snohomish County Sheriff's tip line.
And one thing I've learned about the area where the killer lived, a lot of bodies are found on the side of the road.
From the Kitsap Sun, September 2nd, 2004. Detectives still investigating remains. Today will likely be the last day Highway 16 commuters will see investigators milling about the Purdy exit just inside Kitsap County, an official said. Kitsap County Sheriff's Office Chief of Detectives Ned Newland said there weren't any significant developments in the investigation of skeletal remains discovered Tuesday. Detectives have been working on an unspecified missing person case when they discovered the remains. Newland said the coroner's office will have to identify the remains through dental records, which could take several days. Investigators have been sifting through a small patch of land in the island between the westbound Purdy on-ramp and Highway 16. It's standard procedure for police and coroners to examine scenes when remains are discovered. Newland said that foul play is not suspected.
And there was another one.
No foul play suspected in discovery of body. From the Kitsap Sun on October 14, 2004. Kitsap County Sheriff's detectives found no signs of foul play where a passerby discovered a body Wednesday morning near Seebeck. A neighbor discovered the fully clothed body around 11:30 a.m. in the 17,000 block of Hinsville Road, near the intersection of Hinsville and 1 Mile roads. It was 10 to 15 yards off the road in the brush. The body is believed to be that of a middle-aged male and was in an advanced stage of decomposition, spokesman Deputy Scott Wilson said. Sheriff's detectives examined the scene and didn't find any evidence that the man was killed or dumped there, Wilson said. No weapons were found. Previous instances of bodies discovered along roads have ranged from homicide victims, natural or accidental deaths, and suicides. It's unknown how and why the man died and ended up in the woods, or who he is, Wilson said. The investigation is ongoing. The Kitsap County Coroner's Office will perform an autopsy to determine the cause and manner of the man's death. Sheriff's detectives are sorting through a missing persons database to see if anyone matches the deceased description.
And now back to the missing persons.
Richard Lee Haynes Jr. resided with his father, Richard Lee Haynes Sr., his 4 sisters, and Richard's girlfriend, Marla J. Harding, in a second-floor apartment in the 100 block of North Main Street in downtown Kittitas, Washington, in 2004. His nickname was Cody, and Cody disappeared from his family's home between 4 and 5 p.m. on September 12, 2004. He had refused to wash the dishes, and Harding punished him by making him sit at the kitchen table for 4 hours before sending him to bedroom at about midnight the previous day. Harding told Cody's sisters not to go near his room and told Cody not to leave the room for any reason. Evidently, no one checked on him for close to 18 hours afterwards. Richard was at work when Cody was sent to his room, but came home later and left the house in the early morning to look for car parts. He did not return until 4 p.m. Cody apparently slipped out unnoticed during this time and arranged his stuffed animals on the bed to make it look like he was asleep. He took a black and green camouflage patterned bag of clothing with him, but it was later said to be found in a shed near his house. Investigators believe that Cody may have hidden the bag there and planned to return for it later. His bicycle was also found in the shed. There were a few possible sightings of Cody in the local area shortly after his disappearance. A neighbor may have seen him the morning he disappeared, and someone believes they saw him eating potato chips at Johnny's Servview later that day. Neither sighting has ever been confirmed. Richard notified the police that Cody was gone after he arrived home again that afternoon. Authorities believed at first that Cody had run away from home because he was unhappy at the way he was disciplined, and then he might try to travel to his mother, who lived in Florida. Cody did not arrive in Florida, and his mother has been eliminated as a suspect in his disappearance. A week after Cody vanished, his sisters were removed from their father's home and placed into foster care. The removal order alleged abuse, neglect, and a lack of supervision in the household, and was based mainly on the fact that Cody had been made to stay in his room for 18 hours without being allowed to eat, drink, or use a toilet, and without being checked on by an adult. Harding said that he was a rebellious and deceitful child and needed discipline. Richard and Harding, who married sometime after September 2004, have hired lawyers and will not cooperate with investigators about Cody's disappearance. The rest of his family has cooperated fully with the police. Before the Haynes children were taken from their home, Richard refused to allow police to question them. The family has a history with Washington Child Protective Services. Late in 2001 and again in 2002, Richard was reported to CPS for possibly physically and emotionally abusing and neglecting his children. Witnesses stated that the Haynes children were made to stand around for long periods of time in the wintertime, outside, without coats or shoes. Both times, the allegations were found to be without merit. Cody was in the 6th grade in 2004. He and his sisters were originally public school students, but became homeschoolers after the CPS complaints were made. In February 2005, police obtained a warrant searching the Haynes residence. They had interviewed Cody's sisters several times since their placement in foster care. Initially, the girls said nothing had happened to their brother, but later, Cody's oldest sister told investigators that he had been beaten severely inside his home the day that he vanished. Police searched for traces of blood in the apartment's kitchen to back up the sister's story, but the flooring there had been replaced after Cody's disappearance and without the landlord's knowledge or consent. A second search was made, and police seized a computer and Richard's Chevrolet Suburban. They also searched Harding's car. Authorities made what they termed a significant discovery during one of these searches, but have never elaborated on what exactly it was that they found. Cody may have left of his own accord, but after receiving the information from his sisters, investigators announced that he could be the victim of a homicide. They have no evidence that he was killed inside his home, but the fact that he has not been heard from in so long is indicative that he met foul play. Due to his age and family background, Cody is considered to be in danger. His case was turned over to the FBI in October of 2005. Cody Haynes was 11 years old, 5 feet tall, and weighed 90 pounds. He has brown hair and blue eyes. His case remains unsolved. Nathaniel Edison Williams was last seen on September 28, 2004, in the 400 block of East 10th Street in Morris, Minnesota, on the campus of the University of Minnesota at Morris. He was planning to go hunting and fishing in Two Harbors, Minnesota, possibly near the Pomme de Terre River Valley area. He was apparently traveling alone. 2 days later, some sheriff's deputies saw his teal and white 1966 Ford F-150 pickup truck on the Cowichoe Lake Road off of County Road 7 in Lake County, Minnesota, north of Two Harbors. Williams never returned home and has never been heard from again. Williams' truck was found parked along a back road in the Boundary Waters canoe area. There was no sign of him at the scene. The truck was low on gas, and a search of the surrounding area turned up no sign of Williams or his clothing or any of his hunting or fishing gear. His family resided in Silver Springs, Maryland in 2004. He had lived with roommates during the school year. He is described as an avid hunter using both a gun and bow and arrows, and fisherman who had taken several extended fishing and hunting trips by himself before. As a child, Williams lived lived in various places around the world, including South America, before going to attend high school in the Washington, D.C. area. He only applied to one college after high school, the University of Minnesota, at Morris. He picked it because the surrounding area afforded many hunting and fishing opportunities. He often skipped class in favor of outdoor pursuits. Authorities do not believe that Williams committed suicide, and he was very close to his family. The circumstances surrounding his disappearance are unclear. Both Morris and Lake County authorities continue to investigate this case. Nathaniel Williams was 21 years old. He was 6 foot tall and weighed 160 pounds. He had brown hair and hazel eyes. His head was shaved at the time of his disappearance, and he has a mustache. Williams wears contact lenses or thick glasses with metal rims. His case remains unsolved. Jeffrey Wayne Bowen was last seen at his home in the 1700 block of Hartford Avenue in Wilder, Vermont on October 2, 2004. He has never been heard from again, and few details are available in his case. Hartford, Vermont police are investigating. Jeffrey Bowen was 42 years old, 6 feet 1 inches tall, and weighed over 200 pounds. He has gray hair and brown eyes. His case remains unsolved. Gail Yvonne Anderson was last seen in the evening hours of October 23, 2004, at a residence in the vicinity of the 100 block of D Street in Duncan, Oklahoma. She borrowed a car from a friend so she could make a weekend visit to her mother in Geronimo, Oklahoma. She has never been seen or heard from again. Since her disappearance, Anderson's family has moved away from the area, and few details are available in her case, but foul play is suspected due to the circumstances. Gail Anderson was 29 years old, 4 foot 11 inches tall, and weighed 120 pounds. She has light brown hair and green eyes. She has a tattoo of a rose on her right shoulder. Her case remains unsolved. Jessica Lee Jenkins was last seen in Portland, Oregon on November 8, 2004. She has never been heard from again. She has ties to the Portland area and to Vancouver, Washington, and has been known to live on the streets at times. Few details are available in her case. Vancouver police are investigating. Jessica Jenkins was 30 years old, 5 feet 9 inches tall, and 160 pounds. She has brown hair and green eyes. Her case remains unsolved. Bradley Dale Ross II was last seen in the vicinity of Old Maumee Road in Fort Wayne, Indiana on November 19, 2004. He took his fiancee's silver 2004 Dodge Stratus to pick her up from work, but he never arrived. He has never been heard from again. Ross's fiancee's car was located later that day when it was involved in an accident at the corner of Coliseum Boulevard and State Boulevard in Fort Wayne, Indiana. It is unknown if Ross was driving the vehicle at the time of the accident. He resided in St. Helen, Michigan in 2004. Bradley Ross was 25 years old. He was 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighed 175 pounds. He has brown hair and blue eyes. His case remains unsolved. Michael Robert Dumont was last seen in the company of his family in South Burlington, Vermont on the evening of November 21, 2004. He received a phone call and left afterwards, telling his family he was going to meet someone. He never returned and has never been seen or heard from again. There are few details available in his case. Michael Dumont was 50 years old, 5 feet 9 inches tall, and weighed 185 pounds. He has graying brown hair and blue eyes. His case remains unsolved. Aaron Benjamin Bernard was last seen in Boise, Idaho on December 4, 2004. He was at the McDonald's at Cole Road and Overland Road at 7 p.m., leaving his young son with a child's mother. He was planning to see his son again the next morning, but never arrived. Bernard's last cellular phone call was at 7:15 p.m. on the day of his disappearance. His car was later found parked in his driveway. He has never been heard from again. When police checked his apartment, they found no indications of foul play. He may be driving a green 1995 Land Rover or Range Rover SUV with temporary Idaho license plates. Bernard is a gun dealer and may frequent gun shows. He has also worked as a disc jockey in strip clubs and has been known to carry weapons. The day before he went missing, he told his mother he was thinking of getting his chauffeur's license and buying a limousine. Bernard had outstanding warrants for his arrest for battery in Ada County, Idaho at the time of his disappearance, but police are not sure whether his disappearance has anything to do with that. Prior to the time he went missing, he was fighting for custody of his son and had a falling out with his business business partner. Although no evidence has surfaced to connect the two cases, it's worth noting that Bernard and Jeremy Burt had mutual acquaintances. Burt disappeared from Boise in 2007 and has never been located. Bernard's family describes him as a dedicated father who would not have willingly abandoned his children. He also left behind his dog and cat without making arrangements for their care, which is uncharacteristic of his behavior. There is no evidence of foul play in his case, but due to his lifestyle, his disappearance is considered suspicious. Aaron Bernard was 35 years old, 5 feet 11 inches tall, and weighed 180 pounds. He had black hair and brown eyes, and he has a mustache and a goatee. His ears are pierced, and he has dimples when he smiles. His case remains unsolved. From the CBC News, on December 9th, 2015. 11 years ago this day, Maggie Burke left her Edmonton apartment at 118th Avenue and 95th Street to meet a friend. She hasn't been seen since. It's been a nightmare, said her mother, Marie Burke, a nightmare that we haven't really been able to wake up from. Burke spoke to reporters Wednesday at an Edmonton police conference near where her 21-year-old daughter disappeared so many years ago in 2004. In an effort to generate new chips in the case, Crime Stoppers paid for a billboard to be erected displaying Maggie Burke's photo in the hope of jogging someone's memory. Even though it's been 11 years, we think somebody out there might know something, as small as a tip it might be, said Sergeant Neil Zerowell of the Police Service's Missing Persons Unit. They might think it's insignificant, but it could make all the difference. Zerowell said police had little to go on in the case, one of 83 historical files dating back to the 1970s that are being investigated. Police have their suspicions, but don't have enough information to know exactly what happened. Marie Burke said she wonders every day what happened to her daughter, but is convinced that Maggie just wouldn't take off, as she was close to her family and her friends. She was a kind, loving person, very outgoing, very happy-go-lucky, and she made friends easily. Another heartbreaking part of the case is the fact that Maggie has a daughter, now 11, who wonders what happened to her mother. Maggie worked as a server in restaurants and loved animals. Police said she was known to work in the sex trade at the time she went missing. Her mother notes that she struggled with drug addiction. Please help us find Maggie, Burke said. She is missed and loved by her family and friends. This is the second time police have called for tips on Burke's disappearance. Burke's was the first case that the RCMP used in October in a 10-day social media campaign designed to generate tips for missing and murdered Indigenous women. Police said it's a coincidence the news conference was scheduled one day after a national public inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women was announced. In 2014, RCMP released a report detailing the cases of nearly 1,200 Aboriginal women who went missing between 1980 and 2012. Maggie is also one of the unsolved cases listed on a CBC database about the tragedy. Marie Burke said she feels solidarity with the other families of the victims across the country. Our hearts go out to all of these other families suffering right now, grieving for a lost loved one. I send you my heartfelt prayers. We all seek answers. Sonia Moreno Ronquillo and her boyfriend, Jorge Meza, were last seen in the vicinity of the 1000 block of East Clarence Street in Fort Worth, Texas, on December 12, 2004. Ronquillo's white 2003 Ford Windstar with the Texas license plate number V3NNXM disappeared with her and was reported stolen by her family. It was located later in Nuevo Laredo, Mexico. There was no sign of Sonia at the scene. Ronquillo's family believes she was abducted by Meza and is possibly in danger or being held against her will. Sonia Ronquillo was 32 years old, 5 feet 4 inches tall, and weighed 140 pounds with black hair and black eyes. Jorge Meza was 29 years old, is 5 feet 9 inches tall, and weighed 174 pounds, with black hair and brown eyes. Their case remains unsolved. Marilyn J. Lahan was last seen in Eastport, Maine, sometime in 2004. She had lived with her husband off Clark Street, overlooking Harris Cove, for about 2 years, and she was a member of the local Catholic church. Her husband told her family Lahan had gone to a Catholic retreat in Montana. It wasn't uncommon for her to go a long time without getting in touch with her family, and they didn't report her missing until the summer of 2013. They had last visited her in July 2002. Authorities launched an extensive search of the 14 acres behind Lahan's former home using cadaver dogs, but the search turned up nothing of interest. Her husband now lives in California, and police stated he was cooperative with the investigation into her disappearance. Little information is available in her case. Marilyn Lahan was 49 years old, 5 feet 9 inches tall, 160 pounds. She had light brown hair and brown eyes. Her case remains unsolved.
And then he has, later in the year, in October 6, 2004, returning on October 16, 2004, he took a Southwest Airlines flight from Seattle, Washington to Manchester. And he rented a car there, same amount of time, also Enterprise. He had permission to leave the state, and he had a Kia Amante. But during that one, he put 1,745 miles on it. So that's going to be like a New Hampshire arrival, and then he's, driving up to Maine at the minimum. So if you look at that, so Manchester, right, into Maine, that drive alone is 230 miles. So I'm guessing he went over to New York as well during that time.
Is it even possible this killer is responsible for all of these missing people, murders, and arsons? Well, we're getting closer to the July 3rd reveal of where the bodies are buried. Next week, the killer gets a boat. Thanks for joining us. You can reach us at 252-365-5593 or at truecrimexcess.com or truecrimexcess@gmail.com if you want to send us a note. This episode was brought to you by LabrottieCreations.com. That's LabrottieCreations.com. Check out the merchandise and specifically their fun Pop Pet art custom pieces made from photos of your very own pets. Use the promo code CRIMEXS, that's CRIMEXS, for 20% off a fun, brightly colored, happy piece of art of your own pet at their site, LabrottieCreations.com. Music in this episode was licensed for True Crime XS. The theme song was Indestructible by Noah Smith. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe if you want to hear more. You can come over to Patreon.com and check out what we've got going on there if you'd like to donate to fund future True Crime XS road trip investigations and FOIA requests. We'd also like to thank Anchor and Spotify for having the coolest all-in-one podcast platforms available. Definitely download the Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to start your own show today.
This is True Crime XS.
I got to go back and cover this because I forgot it. There's a case from a gay club up in Canada. I don't know how that would have been back in 2004. I mean, I remember going to them in the 90s with friends. But 2004, if you live in Washington, and you're not really out as bisexual, do you go across the border? Because there's this case, this guy named Icky sticks in my head. I got to find his case because that's an important one too. I think he's late 2003 though. But I had totally forgot about that guy till just now because I wanted to look at it. And something stopped me. Something distracted me from doing that.
From The New Yorker, on June 23, 2016, by Michelle Dean, True Crime Addict and the Serious Problem of Internet Sleuths. Imagine a young woman driving north, headed for New England's White Mountains, a troubled personal life in Amherst, Massachusetts, in her rearview mirror. Mainly, it's small tragedies that preoccupy her. A breakup, some minor credit card fraud charges, a dent in her dad's car. Many people hit a breaking point in their lives. Laura Murray's came on February 9th, 2004. She was 21 years old. Murray probably took I-91 north that day, having packed up her dorm room at the University of Massachusetts and printed out directions from MapQuest. She didn't tell anyone her plans. Around 7:45 p.m., she fell off the map. 45 minutes earlier, she had driven her car into a snowbank along a smaller highway near Haverhill, New Hampshire, not far from the mountains. A neighbor saw the car there and a person pacing outside it and called 911. A school bus driver stopped and talked to Murray just for a moment. She begged him not to call the police. AAA was coming, she said. She was in sufficient distress that the man called the police anyway when he got home. The cops arrived at the scene soon afterward. The car was still there, but Murray was gone. There were no footprints leading away from the scene that could have helped them follow her, wherever she had gone. The area was lightly populated, and the neighbors hadn't seen her leave. A box of wine had spilled all over the interior of the car. Murray's belongings were still in there too, except for her wallet. No one ever heard from Murray again. If you are, like me, an insomniac prone to reading Wikipedia's crime section at night, and I have found this to be a fellowship with a wide subscription, you have probably come across Murray's story before. It's not a particularly famous case in the annals of American crime. It never generated a national media frenzy or fixed Murray in America's minds the way that, say, JonBenet Ramsey was. Still, Murray was young, white, and attractive, attributes that tend to drive a lot of interest in missing persons cases. And there is something haunting about the way she vanished. How just as she seemed to want to check out of her life, it's actually happened. It's Gone Girl before Gone Girl. The sort of narrative hook that can suck a reader into a novel. In the chaos of the real world, the people who got drawn into Murray's story, other than her horrified and grief-stricken friends and family members, were a bunch of strangers on the internet. The dizzying pull of a real-life mystery is nothing new. 19th century newspapers trafficked in amazingly detailed accounts of murders and careful reporting of trials that invite readers to parse the evidence themselves. Pulp magazines like True Detective later sprung up to take their place. A lot of American fantasies are built around a life spent solving crime. When Truman Capote went with Harper Lee to Kansas to report In Cold Blood, he was simply doing what many others had dreamed of. The frenzy in 2014 surrounding Serial, a podcast that investigated an old murder case in Baltimore, was built on the same cultural foundation, and ever since its wild success, it seems as though we've had one true crime craze after another packaged and sold to us, with networks and producers itching to find the next Adnan Syed from Serial, or Stephen Avery, the subject of the Netflix series Making a Murderer. So it's not surprising that an early review of James Renner's True Crime Addict, How I Lost Myself in the Mysterious Disappearance of Maura Murray, would call the book an entrancing, brilliant next step for fans of the podcast Serial, Netflix Making a Murderer, and other true crime cases. Published last month by Thomas Dunn Books, an imprint of St. Martin's Press. True Crime Addict is a strange beast, one that embodies every problem that arises when online obsessives are infected with delusions of detective grandeur. The book follows Renner as he tries over a number of years not simply to report on, but to actually solve personally Maura Murray's disappearance. Renner, who was a reporter for an alternative weekly in Cleveland until he was fired in 2009, has no particular connection to the case other than an apparent obsessive streak that previously was laser-focused on the disappearance of a 10-year-old girl named Amy Mihalovic. In the book, Renner writes, without any evident self-awareness, that he fell in love with Amy Mihalovic when I saw her missing poster hanging on a utility pole when I was 11 years old. He wrote a book about her before he fastened onto Murray. Like most of us, Renner encountered Murray's case many years after her disappearance. On the internet, unlike most of us, he promptly set up a blog and started publishing his findings. He did some shoe leather reporting, going out to the crash site and visiting witnesses' houses. Almost everyone slammed the door on him, or else granted only limited interviews. The people who did not block his way, who wholeheartedly embraced his methods of pursuing the case, were other people on the internet, the commenters on his blog, and the people who emailed him tips, rarely anonymously, but never with any real connection to Murray. And perhaps, because those were the people who accepted him, Renner embraced them in return. He posted every rumor sent his way, no matter how scurrilous or unhelpful. About halfway through the book, Renner delivers a kind of soliloquy about his journalistic methods. I've come to believe that there's only one way to establish credibility with readers, and that is to show them how you're making the sausage. I think reporters should open up their research to all those interested and bring them along for the ride. That means scanning and posting the supporting documents you use to gather your facts. But I think it should go further. What I'd like to see is an open source form of reporting where journalists put notes and documents and pictures and sources in something like a readable Google Doc as they are reporting. This, I think most crime reporters would say, is madness. Crimes, particularly cold cases like Maura Murray's, are often difficult to untangle, susceptible to any number of theories, which necessarily shift and evolve as journalists interview relevant parties and gather documents. People remember things wrong. Sightings turn out to be ghost stories. Frequently, people are wrongly implicated along the way. This is important but dangerous territory for a journalist because, as the reporter Pamela Coliff once told me, the evidence you uncover and the way you frame the story can have tremendous influence on the case itself. It's not only the misdirection of law enforcement that one worries about. The line between investigative crime journalism and harassment can become blurry and difficult to manage. Reporters ask people to talk about personal trauma, and often, unsurprisingly, they don't want to. They can only push so far, ask so many times. Convincing people to speak is gentle and delicate work. Renner is neither gentle nor delicate, and he tends to think that an unwillingness to talk to him is a reason to classify someone as suspicious. Until Fred Murray, I had never heard of a parent of a missing person who turned down the chance for national exposure, Renner writes, which is an absurd claim. Victims' families often stay away from the press. Fred had seen Maura very shortly before she disappeared, and he may have been a confidant of his daughter's, but he had no interest in Renner. Through an intermediary, he said he didn't want a book written at all. For that reluctance, Fred is portrayed as someone who must be hiding from the press, and therefore must know something. Renner describes driving out to Fred's address and finding the house boarded up. The disordered mess disturbed me, he writes. It didn't jibe with the overly controlling image Fred Murray portrayed in public. I asked Murray's family if they wished to comment for this story, but they did not reply. But in 2014, when a reporter from Boston Magazine wrote about the case and Renner's small army of internet sleuths, Fred said of Renner, "What I think he's trying to do is create characters for a screenplay." After reading Renner's book, I think that Fred is onto something. In the screenplay based on True Crime Addict, Renner would inevitably be the hero, the one who fought through everyone else's apathy and bad intentions. Much of the book is concerned with Renner's personal life. At one point, he relates that a psychologist told him, on an exam, he got results similar to those of Ted Bundy, the serial killer. These passages about Renner's temperament make for uncomfortable, even claustrophobic reading, and like the rest of the book, come off as an unintentional indictment of the writer. Cold cases have long attracted hangers-on, like Renner, who work for years on solving the crime, but never do. In cases that broke before the advent of internet sleuthing, they often call themselves private investigators, which represented a shockingly diverse category. Now, many of those people gather on the internet, posting on sites like Renner's. The result is a complicated morass of uncontrolled speculation. It certainly isn't justice. Not for Murray or for her family. I'm frankly surprised that a major publishing house decided to release Renner's book. After all, crime addicts, such as James Renner, rarely, if ever, solve crimes. They are drawn to the most dramatic possibilities and ignore more tedious solutions. For all that Renner has written on Maura Murray's case, both in his book and online, I've never seen him seriously investigate the most plausible theory, that fearing a DUI arrest, Murray walked away from her car in the New Hampshire cold, got lost, and died. The woods are thick up there. A body could disappear.
I think my biggest problem with true crime stuff is that they don't ever solve anything. That really drives me nuts. It's one of the reasons, it's the only reason I'm really doing this. I guess the only reason I'm really doing this is to solve this thing. I should call James and Renner up and give him, like, the locations up there, White Mountains. You know, that's one of the things about that area. It had one of the highest concentrations of these locations. I'm not even kidding. Like, everywhere up there, which is why I was like, oh, well, that raises the odds for me significantly. I still don't know if he did it or not, but if he did, that's where you would find them. I sort of have been wondering all along, though, if we're not crazy. I guess that's part of the whole thing.
I just wanted to tell the story. The saving grace for all of this is that you are a logical thinker and that you're a real person who, like, went through this and figured it all out. I'm just telling the story.